Good morning. I'm Mark Giannino, Worship Associate here at First Parish. Welcome to First Parish in Brookline. We are a welcoming Unitarian Universalist congregation, open and affirming to all people. Whoever you are, whatever your gifts or abilities may be, however you identify your gender or sexual orientation, wherever your life and faith journey has taken you, you are welcome here. Immediately after the service, there will be a post-service conversation with Alfred Bruno about his work on climate justice. Please join him in the Dana Room. Also today, Ann Dinsmore and Eliza Blanchard, co-leaders of the Welcoming Committee, invite you to join them for conversation about becoming more connected and committed at First Parish. You'll find them at the Peterson Room couches during hospitality hour. After the service, please join us for coffee hour through this door to Lion Chapel. If you pick up one of the striped mugs like this, oops, I don't have a striped mug, but a striped mug like this. You see it, don't you? Yes, that one. Everyone will know you have a particular interest in sharing conversation with others today. Welcome to one and all.
Good morning. Our words for our call to worship this morning are from the poet Lucille Clifton. The Mississippi River empties into the Gulf. The Mississippi River empties into the Gulf, and the Gulf enters the sea, and so forth, none of them emptying anything, all of them carrying yesterday forever on their white-tipped backs, all of them dragging forward tomorrow. It is the great circulation of the earth's body. Like the blood of the gods, this river, in which the past is always flowing, every water is the same water coming round. Every day, someone is standing at the edge of this river, staring into time, whispering mistakenly, only here, only now. Come, my friends, come into this beloved and sacred space and let us worship together. And now please rise as you are willing and able and join in singing our opening hymn, number 168, One More Step, verses 1 to 3.
At this time, I'd like to invite Sarah, Ben, Barrett, and Tyler Gibbons to come forward to light the chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith the world over. As they light the chalice, please join me in our unison affirmation, printed in your order of service in English and then in Spanish. We give ourselves one unto another, covenanting to walk together as a congregation, promising faithfully to watch over one another and to delight for love to abide in our midst. Nos entregamos y nos comprometemos a caminar juntos como congregación, prometiendo con mucha fe cuidarnos mutuamente y de tratarnos en el amor que permanecerá entre nosotros. Each Sunday, we also light 2 candles of peace and hope, remembering places on earth, a special concern today and through the week. After each candle is lit, we will speak the words for peace in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. Peace, salam, shalom. Today, we remember 2 places that we hold especially close. After each of the candles is lit, we will speak the words for peace in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. Our first candle is lit for South Africa, where thousands of abandoned flamingo chicks were rescued recently from the dried-out Camphors Dam. May all life everywhere be valued and protected. Peace, salam, shalom. Our second candle is lit for Rio de Janeiro, where Brazilian football fans are grieving the loss of a group of teen players in a fire. May all find comfort and may they rest in peace. Peace, salam, shalom.
Oh. Sing the children out, please. Now in peace, oh, now in peace, may the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Glory on us, fire on us, donde quiera que vaya. Ave, Él es free, la hora tu metale.
Good morning.
Morning.
Our first reading is an excerpt from Dr. King's 1964 Nobel Peace Prize speech. I accept this award today with an abiding faith in America and an audacious faith in the future of mankind. I refuse to accept despair as the final response to the ambiguities of history. I refuse to accept the idea that the isness of man's present nature makes him morally incapable of reaching up for the eternal oughtness that forever confronts him. I refuse to accept the idea that man is mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life, unable to influence the unfolding events which surround him. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I refuse to accept the cynical notion that nation after nation must spiral down a militaristic stairway into the hell of thermonuclear destruction. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right, temporarily defeated, is stronger than evil triumphant. I believe that even amid today's mortar bursts and whining bullets, there is still hope for a brighter tomorrow. I believe that wounded justice, lying prostrate on the blood-flowing streets of our nations, can be lifted from this dust of shame to reign supreme among the children of men. I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits. I believe that what self-centered men have torn down, men other-centered can build up. I still believe that one day mankind will bow before the altars of God and be crowned triumphant over war and bloodshed, and non-violent redemptive good will proclaim the rule of the land. Quote, "And the lion and the lamb shall lie down together, and every man shall sit under his own vine and fig tree, and none shall be afraid." Unquote. I still believe that we shall overcome. This faith can give us courage to face the uncertainties of the future. It will give our tired feet new strength as we continue our forward stride toward the city of freedom. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds, and our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, we will know that we are living in the creative turmoil of a genuine civilization struggling to be born.
Amen. Now please join me in the spirit of prayer, followed by silent meditation. After our prayer, I'll ring the bell and we'll have a time of silence, and then I'll ring it again at the end. Let us pray. Spirit of life and love, we gather today in gratitude for the life of a man whose words and message touched us deeply and still resound as a call to love and justice and action decades later. May we never forget all that was offered to us and to the world through the life of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Today, we also hold in our hearts those among us who are suffering, who long for healing, ache for peace, thirst for justice. Their pain is our pain. Their losses and fears are ours as well. We cannot truly be at peace as long as one among us is struggling. And we celebrate joys today as well, the joys of living in this world, of loving and sharing, connection and achievement. Our hearts are filled with these too. It is the nature of being human, of being alive, to embrace all that life has to offer, the good, the bad, the hard times and the joyous ones. This is what it means to be alive. Sharing these times is what it means to be a community. Spirit of all names and no name, help us remember today and every day that we walk this path together, that we have each other. May we find ways to reach out to ask to be comforted and to comfort. May it be so. Amen. Blessed be.
hiding behind the labels, how the oil palm is causing land conflict, deforestation, climate change, poverty, and displacement. In the latter part of 2018, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report on the 1.5 degrees Celsius of the planet informed the world that we have 12 more years to reduce global warming, with humankind left with little to no pathway to resolve this threat. It was a call to action to either launch a rescue mission for the planet and its people or perish together. Climate impacts are already being observed, and people and the planet are in peril. According to the report, global average temperature have already warmed by about 1 degree since the pre-industrial times. Around 100% of this warming is the result of human activity. If this rate continues, according to the report, the global average warming is likely to reach 1.5 degrees before 2030 and 2052. One scientist even jokingly said that the climate scientists were caught napping by the 1.5 degrees centigrade limit. The report asserts that climate impacts are already being observed on land and ocean's ecosystem and the services they provide. It says temperature rise to date has already resulted in profound alteration to human and natural systems, bringing increasing type of extreme weather, drought, flood, sea level rise, and biodiversity loss, and causing unprecedented risks to vulnerable persons and population. Most of the reports have indicated that climate-induced migration will result into more than 30 million people already losing their home, and almost 2 million will be displaced. In the US, the fourth National Climate Assessment, authored by hundreds of US climate scientists from 13 federal agencies, have indicated that the US is poised to take a powerful economic hit from climate change over the next century. Heat waves, wildfire, extreme weather event, rising sea level could cost the country hundreds of billions of dollars in lost labor, reduced crop yields, health problems, and crumbling infrastructure. In addition to what that is, it says that the economic losses in the US, if nothing is done by the year 2090, will result into between $280 to $500 billion yearly. Further complementing what this report from the US have said, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate further said that people that have been the most affected will live in low middle income countries, some of whom have already seen a decline in food insecurity, linked in turn to rising migration and poverty. In the report, it says that emission in line with current pledges under the Paris Agreement is expected to surpass the 1.5 degrees centigrade, even if they are supplanted with every challenging increases in the scale and ambition of mitigation after 2030. It says that with the national pledges, as they stand, warming could exceed 1.5, at least for a period of time, and practices and technology that remove CO2 from the atmosphere is at a global scale and will be required to return warming to 1.5. What will it take to reduce this warming by 1.5? According to the report, cutting emissions to meet a 1.5 limit will require rapid and far-reaching transition across the global economy. This transition will need to transform the way energy is used and the sources it comes from, the way land use and agricultural systems are organized, and the types and quantities of food and material that I consume. To address this issue, in Liberia, in the last 8 years, before this report was issued, I have been involved in trying to address specifically the issues around land use and forestry. In my country, between 2010 and 2012, the government granted land and natural resources right to a number of companies for commercial purposes. These grants amounted to a number of violations: a massive land grab without the consent of communities, clear cutting of large remaining forest areas in West Africa, which is referred to as the lungs of West and North Africa, destruction of farmlands, destruction of sacred sites, pollution of water sources, and diversion of creek and stream. By 2010, these communities contacted me to help them to protect their forests, secure their land, and stop the world's largest oil palm companies from destroying the largest remaining tropical forest in West Africa, which is home to indigenous people and the biodiversity hotspot, referred, as I said before, as the lungs of West and North Africa. I, having received this request from these indigenous folks, launched a series of advocacy and legal actions resulting into victories for these communities and the protection of the forest. The victory, however, came with a price. For me, my family, my tens of thousands of indigenous clients. I was nearly assassinated, was forced to flee my country. A number of my clients were arrested, some of whom were women leaders who were severely beaten, stripped naked, and thrown in prison. And a number of my clients took flight into the forest where they live in caves and under tree trunks for many, many months. While in exile here in the United States, at Northeastern University School of Law, I fought back and worked along with colleagues and other organizations to challenge the oil palm companies. In May 2018, as we engaged in the different exchanges of trying to address the legal issues around the shutdown of the oil palm company, the company lost its appeal against my complaint, and a final stop order was issued to now protect this land and this forest, bringing final victory to the people and saving these forest areas. But this complaint to try to protect this forest and indigenous people is not just an issue concerning Liberia. As I indicated about the report from the panel of experts, it is very clear that this is a global problem. And the oil palm has become an issue of climate justice. No one needs to tell you about the devastation the oil palm industry has wreaked on indigenous people worldwide and the forest and indigenous species. We hear a lot about the peril of the orangutan in Southeast Asia. In 2013, Carson and Curran reported that oil palm accounts for about 9% of all tropical emissions. In Indonesia alone, oil palm deforests an area the size of Rhode Island on a yearly basis. In October of 2015, Bloomberg calculated Indonesia's carbon emission has 61 megatons, greater than the emission of the entire US economy at that time. Currently, Indonesia is ranked as third among the world's largest emitter of global warming after China and the United States, mainly due to oil palm. What is oil palm, or what is palm oil, may I say? The palm oil is an edible vegetable oil derived from the reddish pulp of the fruit of the oil palm. It is one of the world's most ubiquitous and pervasive ingredients found in many of our well-known products we put in and on our bodies. It is found in our bread, margarine, peanut butter, crackers, cookies, ice cream, lipstick, toothpaste, soap, candies, and is the source of biofuel. To meet the demand of this product, millions of acres of forests tens of thousands of threatened and endangered species, and the home of indigenous people and poor communities are being bulldozed to the ground, in the process contributing to deforestation, greenhouse gas emission, and series of escalating social conflict, most often than not at an alarming rate. The challenge is that none of us really get to see or hear about the abuses and violations the companies that are involved in the cultivation and production of the palm oil you can see. We do not even see the names of these companies involved in these abuses when we go shopping, because they are all well hidden behind labels on prized groceries. For example, in my country, Liberia, you never get to see golden ferroleum or Sam Dabi on their grocery list. It is not a label in many grocery stores. As you all know, right across the world, consumers are seeking to make choices in line with their values and are also looking to find more about companies whose brand they buy. So here's what they can do, as oil is now gloaming. In the US, for example, an organization, Oxfam, decided to do something about big businesses hiding behind labels of brand. They organized a campaign referred to as Behind the Brands. Oxfam researched and realized that while the food system is complex and its problem multifaceted, they knew that the world's largest food and beverage companies have enormous influence. They knew that most companies' policies were a major driver for how food is produced, the way resources are used, and the extent to which the benefits trickle down to the marginalized millions at the bottom of the supply chain. So the design behind the brand campaign, the idea was to provide people who buy and enjoy this product with the information they need to hold 10 of the biggest food and beverage companies to account for what is in their supply chain. They use a scorecard based entirely on publicly available information on company policies. The scorecard assesses the policies of these companies on their sourcing of agricultural commodities from developing countries. The scorecard looked at 7 teams, weighing each team equally. The 7 producers in the supply chain. So they include, number 1, transparency at corporate level, women farm workers and small-scale producers at supply chain level, workers on farm in the supply chain, farmers small-scale growing the commodities, land, both right and access to land and sustainable use of it, water, both right and access to water resources and sustainable use of it, and yet 7, climate, both relating to reducing greenhouse gas emission and helping farmers adapt to climate change. The scoring range has followed. Number 1 is between 8 and 10, they refer to that as good. 6 and 7 is fair. 4 and 5, there's some progress. 2 and 3 is poor. 0 to 1 is very poor. The indicators approaches 6 of the 7 teams, all except transparency. They assess the following: awareness. Does the company demonstrate general awareness of key issues relating to that team? Knowledge. Does the company demonstrate it measures, assesses, and report key issues, and specifically in the supply chain that relates to that team? Then supply chain management. Does the company require its suppliers to meet relevant standards related to that team? Oxfam currently works with people around the world, on Facebook, on Twitter, in person, to push these companies to do more for human rights and environment. Make your voice heard. Join this campaign and make sure that these companies are hearing from you. As I take my seat, I hope you've been moved to take action, because you need to remember that while you are having fun eating your ice cream or using the most expensive shampoos, someone in a poor country is paying a high price. I therefore want to leave you with the teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King. And he said, we are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. Yes, procrastination is still the thief of time. Life often leaves us standing in bed, naked and dejected with a lost opportunity. The tide in the affair of men does not remain at the floor, it ebbs. We may cry out desperately for time to pause in her passage, but time is deaf to every plea and rushes on. Or what the bleached bones and jumbled residues of numerous civilizations are written the pathetic words. Too late. There is an invisible book of life that faithfully records our vigilance or our neglect. The moving fingers writes, and having written, moves on. We still have a choice today, non-violent coexistence or violent annihilation. This may well be mankind's last chance to choose between chaos and community. Finally, he says, our life begins to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And yes, time is always right to do what is right.
The offering will now be gratefully received. If you're visiting First Parish for the first time, please feel free to let the basket pass you by. We are so glad to have you with us.
For all you have given and for all that we have received, we say thank you.
Our second reading is an excerpt from a Christmas sermon on peace by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. It really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We are made to live together because of the interrelated structure of reality. Did you ever stop to think that you can't leave for your job in the morning without being dependent on most of the world? You get up in the morning, go to the bathroom, reach over for a sponge, and that's handed to you by a Pacific Islander. You reach for a bar of soap, and that's given to you at the hands of a Frenchman. And then you go into the kitchen to drink your coffee for the morning, and that's poured into your cup by a South American. And maybe you want tea. That's poured into your cup by a Chinese, or maybe you're desirous of having cocoa for breakfast, and that's poured into your cup by a West African. And then you reach over for your toast, and that's given to you at the hands of an English-speaking farmer, not to mention the baker. And before you finish eating breakfast in the morning, you've depended on more than half of the world. This is the way our universe is structured. This is its interrelated quality. We aren't going to have peace on earth until we recognize this basic fact of the interrelated structure of all reality. Now, let me say, secondly, that if we're to have peace in the world, men and nations must embrace the nonviolent affirmation that ends and means must cohere. One of the great philosophical debates of history has been over the whole question of means and ends. And there have always been those who argued that the end justifies the means, that the means really aren't important. The important thing is to get the end, you see. So if you're seeking to develop a just society, they say, the important thing is to get there, and the means are really unimportant. Any means will do so long as they get you there. They may be violent, they may be untruthful means, they may be unjust means to a just end. There have been those who have argued this throughout history, but we will never have peace in the world until men everywhere recognize that ends are not cut off from means, because the means represent the ideal in the making and the end in process. And ultimately, you can't reach good ends through evil means, because the means represent the seed and the end represents the tree. Please rise as you are willing and able, and let's join our voices in the hymn of preparation, number 1035, Freedom is Coming.
Freedom is coming.
Writing this sermon 2 weeks ago, I spent a lot of time with the speeches of Dr. Martin Luther King. And as always, I was initially struck by what a profound and powerful orator he was, as well as an amazing civil rights activist, even a politician when he needed to be. He had an impressive way with words, persuasive, moving, insightful, and we've heard so many wonderful ones this morning. And threading through everything he said and did, he was first and foremost a minister. Not just a minister to his own flock at Ebenezer Baptist Church, but also, thankfully, a minister to all of us, indeed, to every living thing. One who ministered with empathy as well as passion, and one who was driven to set things right for us all. Many people, including his son, Martin Luther King III, have imagined what Dr. King would be focused on, what new injustice might he be passionately pointing us toward if he had lived and were still with us today. Climate justice is one area that his son and others regularly point to. King's work in the later 60s before his death turned to shining a light on and advocating fiercely for the poorest among us, not just his own beloved people of color, but all poor people all over the world. In India, Africa, Appalachia, in the inner cities, everywhere that injustice has been perpetrated by our increasing focus on material wealth. It stands to reason, when we listen to Alfred's testimonial, that the poorest people in our world, many of them indigenous people, are being disproportionately affected by the system where the wealthiest people and nations are insulated from the worst effects of their quest for more. And the poorest, the most vulnerable, bear the brunt of their greed. It makes sense that Dr. King would have been right out in front, pointing us in this direction. The world, says King, faces the danger of the evil triplets: racism, militarism, and materialism. Those interrelated features, he said, are at the root of wars against distant people for control of natural resources needed to maintain the luxuries of a few. And those wars most deeply affect historically marginalized communities: indigenous people, people of color, immigrants, the elderly, and LGBTQ people. As Reverend William Barber, leader of the Poor People's Campaign, says, where there's pollution, a community will get a cold, but poor people will get pneumonia. Makes me think of a newspaper story I heard years ago that happened in one of our big cities. A SWAT team was trying to reason with a man who was holding his baby out of an apartment window several stories up. Whatever his story, he was desperate and insisting, "I'm going to drop him. Stay back. I'm going to drop him." A little boy managed to worm his way into the room through the crowd and called out, "Hey, mister, you better bring your baby inside. He's going to catch a cold." And instinctively, the man did just that, hugging the baby to him and giving the team a chance to grab them both. From the mouths of babes, right? Makes you wonder if young children are so keenly aware of the dangers around them. School children learning about the impact of drought and floods, wildfires and deforestation, water and air pollution, the effects on the poorest among us. How is it that the most powerful nation in the world continues to turn a blind eye? At the end of the day, it comes back to money and to our priorities. When Alfred and I talked about this service, I said to him, the stories that you're going to tell are scary and worrying. People will want hope. They'll want ideas of things that they can do. In our post-service conversation with Alfred, you will learn about some of the actions that we can each take. When I shared those ideas with my grandson Cooper, he said, he's 11, he said, "That doesn't seem like enough. I don't think that one person can really do anything. How can that make a difference?" I told him about the 1960s and 70s when many of us engaged in boycotts of California grapes and lettuce, led by Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers, which eventually led to better working conditions for California migrant workers. Many of us probably remember those years of not buying green grapes or iceberg lettuce. In the end, the actions of individuals made a difference. Just like the actions of individuals in the civil rights movement who refused to leave lunchroom counters or give up their seat on a bus or move from a picket line, made a difference eventually in desegregating schools, businesses, restaurants throughout this country. So that's the message of hope and action that we can take away today. It makes a difference. The choices we make as consumers, the actions we take as individuals, letter writing, signing petitions, speaking up. We can't give up. We can't get disheartened. Those of us who have the luxury of not doing anything, we can take small steps. 2 weeks ago, some of us were at the Women's March in Boston, and we were finally rewarded for our frigid vigil on the Common by hearing the keynote speaker, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She echoed so much of what we heard already this morning. The pursuit of justice is uncomfortable, she said, and inconvenient. It is not going to be easy, and we are all going to have to make sacrifices to make it work. She reminded us of how at the first Women's March 2 years ago, we were told, today we march and tomorrow we run. And her victory last November, the victories of so many women and so many women of color, were a result of that commitment to take action, to run. Pressley also quoted Coretta Scott King, who said, "I must remind you that starving a child is violence. Neglecting school children is violence. Punishing a mother and her family is violence. Discrimination against a working man is violence. Ghetto housing is violence. Ignoring medical need is violence. Contempt for poverty is violence." And I would add today, neglecting the health of the planet is violence. Ignoring the warnings of global warming scientists, piling up wealth on the backs of the poor, turning our backs on to the risks of animal and plant life in our continued devotion to so-called progress, that is all a form of violence. In May 1966, Dr. King was the Ware Lecturer at the UUA General Assembly. The title of his speech was, "Don't Sleep Through the Revolution." He told the story of Rip Van Winkle, and he pointed out a passing detail in the story. When Van Winkle went up the mountain, before he fell into his long sleep, he passed a tavern sign with a picture of King George III. And when he woke and came back down again, 20 years later, the picture was of George Washington. Rip Van Winkle slept through the revolution. Don't sleep through the hard realizations of our times, King said. All life is interrelated. Somehow we are all tied together. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the unarmed truth, the truth we all know that doesn't need to be armed to defend. We can't stay asleep. We must decide to take action. I was reminded this week of the Hebrew word hineni, which means I am. Here I am. Here we are. Hineni. Here we are. Once again, hearing Dr. King's words, I refuse to accept the idea that the isness of man's present nature makes him morally incapable of reaching up for the eternal oughtness that forever confronts him. I refuse to accept the idea that man is mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life, unable to influence the unfolding events which surround him. We are made to live together because of the interrelated structure of reality. My friends, armed with only the truth and with unconditional love as our guide, we must each do what we can to protect this earth, our beloved planet. Dr. King, in his ministry to every living being, believed in us. He believed we had it in us to avoid mutually assured destruction. He also thought we were developing the insights and activist resources to radically align our world to the moral arc of the universe. The climate justice movement just might become the place where we prove him right. May it be so. Amen. Blessed be. And now please rise as you are willing and able and join in our closing hymn, number 149, Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Please join me in our unison affirmation as Reverend Lisa extinguishes the chalice. We extinguish the flame and not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us and offer as gifts unto the world.
Now please take the hand or touch the elbow or shoulder of someone near you for the benediction. These are the words of Langston Hughes. I dream a world where man no other man will scorn, where love will bless the earth and peace its paths adorn. I dream a world where all will know sweet freedom's way, where greed no longer saps the soul nor avarice blights our day. A world I dream where black or white, whatever race you be, will share the bounties of the earth and every man is free, where wretchedness will hang its head and joy like a pearl attends the needs of every mankind, of all mankind. Of such I dream my world. Dear friends, may you be a blessing to all those you meet in the world, and may you be blessed. Amen.